Today we're going to talk about some very common verbs you'll use in your OET writing and speaking, and we'll talk about some different ways to use them. Hello and welcome to another lesson on OET Grammar. I'm Sharon, and I think this lesson will be very useful for you. It's brought to you by edubenchmark.com. In this video, we're going to talk about how verbs change in different tenses and why you should be familiar with how this works. But before we go any further, please don't forget to click the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos with tips on how to pass your OET exam. So what are verbs? Verbs are words that show action. And in today's video, we're going to look at a list of common verbs that you will use a lot in your work as well as in OET. If you're not familiar with the meaning of some of these words, please take time later to look them up. But for now, we're just going to study the patterns of how they change from tense to tense. For a little extra pronunciation practice, please repeat them after me. Examine, start, admit, suggest, recommend, advise, reveal, improve, deteriorate, suffer, come, begin, give. For each of these verbs, we're going to show you how to use them in the present and in the simple past. Then we will show you the past participle form and the ing form. These are verb forms that require a helper, such as has needed or am giving. Let's look at the present tense form first. The present form can be the verb at its basic form, as you can see from this table. Pause the video whenever you need to. Each verb also has a present form with an S at the end. We have to add the S when we are using the third person singular. Here's an example. I start the test early. You start the test early. He or she or it starts the test early. We start the test early. You start the test early. They start the test early. Notice that for the third person singular, the he, she, or it sentence, we need to add S to the verb. Here's a little pronunciation tip. Sometimes that S will say S, and sometimes it will say Z. How do you know which sound to make? Say the words with me and see if you can guess. Examines, starts, admits, suggests, recommends, advises, reveals, improves, deteriorates, suffers, comes, begins, gives. Did you guess? If the letter before the S is a voiced sound, that is, if we use our voice to make the sound, then the S will also be voiced, which makes it say Z. If the letter before the S is not a voiced sound, then the S also remains unvoiced, which makes it say S. Here's an example. Examine, the N is a voiced sound. You use your voice to say N, so the S also becomes voiced, which makes it say Z. So we say examines. Starts, the T is an unvoiced sound, t, t, so the S also stays unvoiced, and we say starts. Now let's look at the past form of the verb. Most past forms of the verb are simply formed by adding ed to the end of the original verb. If the verb already ends with an e, then we only need to add the d. For instance, examine already ends with an e, so only a d is needed to form the past form. However, for the next word, start, we need to add ed to the end in order to form the past form. It becomes started. Here are some spelling tips that may be useful for your OET writing. If the last vowel sound of the word is a short sound, you need to double the final consonant before you add ed. Look at admit and admitted. If the final vowel sound is a long sound, you don't need to double the final consonant. Look at reveal and revealed, deteriorate and deteriorated. If there is a consonant before the last sound, then you don't need to double the final consonant. Look at suggest, suggested, recommend, recommended. This is just a tip for you. Don't worry too much about this right now. It's enough for you to memorize the spelling of these common verbs which you'll use in your OET work. Here's another pronunciation tip. Read through these words with me and see if you can figure out whether the ed at the end says d, t, or ed. Examined, started, admitted, suggested, recommended, advised, revealed, improved, deteriorated, suffered. What do you think? It's the same as S. If the final sound of the word is voiced, then the ed will say d, also voiced. Look at examine, examined. If the final sound of the word is not voiced, then ed will become a t. Look at talk, talked. If the final sound of the word is a t or a d, then we say ed. Look at suggested and recommended. Again, that's just a tip for your English language learning. It's enough for now just to memorize and practice the spelling and pronunciation of these common OET verbs. At this point, I need to let you know that there are some verb forms that can't be made into the simple past just by adding ed. These are irregular verbs and they're common in English. Unfortunately, there are really no rules for these, and you will just have to study and learn them one by one. Here are the final 3 verbs on our list, and they are irregular. The first one is come. The past tense of come is came. The past tense of begin is began. And the past tense of give is gave. Let's move on. There's another form of the verb called the past participle form. This form is used with the helping verb have, and we'll talk about this in a future lesson. But the good news is that the same verbs you created by adding ed to the past form will have the same form as a past participle. For instance, the past form for examine is examined. The past participle form of examine is also examined. They are the same. If you look at the table, I have highlighted those words where the past form and the past participle form are the same and pronounced the same way. Now let's look at those verbs which do not have the ed ending in the past form. For these irregular verbs, the past participle form can be quite different. Again, there is no choice but for you to learn them, as there are no fixed rules on how to create these verbs. So for our final 3 words in the table, the irregular past participle forms are has come, has begun, and has given. Finally, we've come to the last form of the verb, which is the ing form. It's fairly easy to create this form because you just add ing to the end of the verb. One use of this form is the present continuous, which we use quite often in English. I am examining the patient, but we'll talk more about that in a future lesson. Here are a few spelling tips for the ing form. If the verb ends with an E, we drop the E before we add ing. Let's look at the first verb, examine. Since it ends with an E, you need to drop the E and then add the ing. So we have examining. The next verb is start, so you just add ing. The next one is admit. Just like you had to double the final consonant when you added the ed because of the short vowel sound of the I, now you need to double it as well before you add ing. So it is admitting. For the next verb, suggest, remember that you did not have to double the final consonant in the ed form. The same goes here, so you just need to add ing. Suggesting. Here are the rest of the verbs in ing form. Please repeat them after me and always feel free to pause the video if you need to. Examining, starting, admitting, suggesting, recommending, advising, revealing, improving, deteriorating, suffering, coming, beginning, giving. Can you see all the verbs clearly now in this table? It is important for you to know the different forms of each verb that you need to use. In other lessons, I will be referring to these verb forms again, and I will tell you when and how you can use them. Here's a way you can practice this. Think of other verbs you use in your OET work and practice changing them like we did today. It's easy to find verb lists online that you can use. I hope today's tips have helped you learn more about the verbs you may use on your OET exam. Check out our website, edubenchmark.com, for more on the OET. We have courses, articles, and services to help you. Please contact us if we can help you prepare for your exam. Thanks for looking at these verbs with me, and we'll see you in the next video.